When the world watched South Africa in 1994, it was like witnessing the rebirth of a nation. After decades of blood, exile, and struggle, the impossible had happened. The black majority had finally voted. Nelson Mandela, the man who had become a global symbol of hope, walked out of prison not as a broken man, but as a leader ready to rebuild his country. Crowds filled the streets. Tears fell from the eyes of those who had suffered for generations. The cameras captured smiles, songs, flags, and promises of a new dawn. The world called it a miracle. But behind that miracle was a compromise, a secret deal that would shape the nation's destiny for decades to come. Apartheid was not only a system of racial domination, it was an entire economic architecture. It decided who owned the land, who mined the gold, who harvested the crops, and who lived in the shadows. It was a structure so deeply rooted that removing it would require dismantling the entire foundation of South African society. Yet when the transition came, that foundation remained intact. The world saw political freedom, but the economic chains that held the black majority in poverty were never broken. It was the perfect illusion of liberation. In the years leading to Mandela's release, negotiations had already begun behind closed doors. The apartheid government was collapsing under pressure, but its economic elite were far from defeated. They understood something crucial. If they could no longer rule politically, they could still rule economically. To them, political power was expendable, but economic power was sacred. So while the world celebrated the end of racial segregation, another process unfolded quietly, one that ensured South Africa's mines, banks, and industries would stay under the same ownership. When Mandela walked out of Victor Verster prison, he carried the hopes of millions, but also the weight of impossible expectations. The people wanted land, they wanted jobs, they wanted dignity restored. But the international community, the same world that had boycotted apartheid, now warned against radical change. The World Bank, the IMF, and Western governments began shaping the transition. Their message was clear. South Africa's new democracy must respect the free market. That meant no nationalization of the mines, no mass redistribution of land, and no disruption of foreign investment. The very institutions that had ignored apartheid's crimes now dictated the terms of freedom. The African National Congress had long promised economic justice. Its Freedom Charter of 1955 declared that the land shall be shared among those who work it, and the mineral wealth beneath the soil shall belong to the people. But as negotiations advanced in the early 1990s, that dream was rewritten. Instead of radical reform, South Africa adopted what was called the Growth, Employment, and Redistribution Plan, GEAR. It sounded technical, harmless even. In reality, it was a neoliberal program crafted to reassure markets, not citizens. It favored privatization, foreign investment, and fiscal discipline. The rich cheered. The poor waited for miracles that never came. By the time Mandela took office, the country was already tied to global financial systems that limited what his government could do. The apartheid regime had left massive debts, billions of dollars owed to foreign banks. Rather than canceling that debt, international institutions demanded repayment. The new government complied, so the same people who had suffered under apartheid now had to pay for its debts. Money that could have built schools, hospitals, and homes was redirected to satisfy creditors in London, New York, and Zurich. Freedom came with an invoice. In the first years of democracy, expectations were sky high. Millions waited for houses and jobs. The government did make progress, building millions of low-cost homes, expanding electricity, and improving access to water. But these achievements could not hide the deeper truth. The economy was not transformed. Land ownership remained almost exactly as it had been before 1994. Big business stayed in the same hands. The mining companies that had profited from apartheid's cheap labor system continued operating under new laws, but old ownership. Political power had changed color. Economic power had not. The people began to feel the difference between symbolic freedom and real liberation. They could vote, but could not escape poverty. They could travel freely, but had nowhere to go. The townships that had been built to confine black laborers became permanent slums. Inequality widened as a new black elite emerged, connected to government contracts and corporate boards, while millions remained trapped in unemployment. This was the birth of what some call two South Africas. One, urban and rich, gleaming with skyscrapers and shopping malls. The other, rural and forgotten, filled with shacks, hunger, and despair. For global investors, this was the perfect outcome. South Africa remained stable, open to trade, and safe for capital. But for ordinary people, it was a quiet betrayal. They had sacrificed everything to dismantle apartheid, yet the fruits of that struggle slipped from their hands. The gold and diamonds continued to leave the country, the profits flowing to multinational corporations and foreign shareholders. South Africa became free, but not independent. Unemployment became a silent plague. Each year, millions of young people entered a job market that could not absorb them. By the 2000s, more than a quarter of South Africans had no work. In some townships, the youth unemployment rate exceeded 50%. Desperation turned into anger. Crime surged, social trust eroded, and hope began to fade. The promise of the Rainbow Nation was replaced by frustration. The dream was beautiful, but reality was unforgiving. As the years passed, corruption began to rot the heart of the state. The liberation movement that had fought for justice now became entangled in the temptations of power. Political elites used state resources for personal gain. The world that once praised South Africa's democracy started to speak of state capture. The phrase described more than just corruption. It meant the entire state apparatus was being controlled by private interests. Businessmen, politicians, and global companies formed networks that drained billions from the economy. The betrayal deepened. Electricity blackouts, known as load shedding, became part of daily life. The state-owned power company, Eskom, once a symbol of national pride, was hollowed out by mismanagement and greed. Infrastructure decayed. The people began to see that political freedom without honest governance is a fragile illusion. Each blackout, each scandal, each protest was a reminder that liberation had stalled. But perhaps the greatest symbol of unfinished freedom is the land. Under apartheid, more than 80% of the land was owned by white South Africans. After nearly 3 decades of democracy, that number barely changed. Efforts to redistribute land were slow, bureaucratic, and often symbolic. The government hesitated, fearing backlash from investors and international markets. Yet without land, there can be no true liberation. Land is not just soil. It is identity, history, and survival. For the black majority, denied ownership for centuries, the unfulfilled promise of land remains a wound that never heals. In the late 2000s, movements like the economic freedom fighters reignited the call for land expropriation without compensation. The idea was radical but simple. Return land to the people without paying those who had stolen it under colonialism and apartheid. Critics called it dangerous. Supporters called it justice. The debate exposed the core of South Africa's struggle, the unfinished revolution. Political independence had come, but economic emancipation had not. The same story echoed across Africa. Nations freed from colonial rule, but trapped in financial dependency. Globalization, which was supposed to bring prosperity, deepened inequality. Cheap imports destroyed local industries. The mining sector mechanized, shedding jobs. The education system, still shaped by apartheid's legacy, failed to equip millions for a changing world. Those who succeeded did so in spite of the system, not because of it. A small middle class emerged, but it could not carry the weight of an entire nation's hopes. By the time the 2020s arrived, South Africa faced a new crisis of faith. The youth no longer believed in the promises of democracy. Many saw elections as meaningless rituals. The idea that liberation could come through the same system that betrayed them felt absurd. Anger grew on social media, in universities, in the streets. Students protested for free education. Communities protested for water and electricity, and workers protested for fair wages. Each protest was not just about one issue. It was about broken trust. The rainbow had faded. The nation felt divided once again. Yet, the story of South Africa is not only one of betrayal, it is also one of resilience. Despite the pain, the people endure. They still sing, still march, still demand change. Every generation rediscovers the same truth. Freedom is not a gift. It must be fought for continuously. The spirit of resistance that defeated apartheid still burns, waiting for a new direction. The question is no longer whether South Africa is free. It is whether freedom can survive under the weight of economic injustice. The irony is sharp. During apartheid, the struggle was clear. Black against white, oppressor against oppressed. Today, the lines are blurred. Many of those in power look like the people they once liberated, but act like the rulers they replaced. Corruption is not racial, it is systemic. Inequality is not accidental, it is designed. The betrayal is not only in policy but in values. The values that once united the struggle are now traded for power and wealth. To the world, South Africa remains a symbol. Tourists visit Robben Island and the Apartheid Museum. They take photos of Mandela's statue and celebrate the miracle of 1994. Few see the daily reality behind the symbols. The children growing up in shacks, the workers striking for survival wages, the families living without electricity or clean water. The world wanted a happy ending, and South Africa gave it to them. But history did not end in 1994. It merely changed its mask. Today, South Africa stands at a crossroads. It can continue to live in the shadow of its past, or it can complete the revolution that began generations ago. Completing that revolution does not mean destroying the economy. It means transforming it to serve the people, not exploit them. It means redistributing land, investing in education, and holding leaders accountable. It means building a society where freedom is not measured by votes, but by dignity. The betrayal of South Africa's freedom is not final. It is a warning to all nations that political change without economic justice is hollow. It is a reminder that liberation movements can lose their way if they forget the people they fought for. And it is a lesson to the world that the structures of colonialism and capitalism are not easily erased. They reinvent themselves under new names and faces. As the sun sets over Johannesburg's skyline, the city tells two stories. One of wealth and ambition, the banks, the towers, the highways. Another of struggle, the townships, the power cuts, the unemployed youth wandering without purpose. These two worlds coexist, but rarely meet. The question that haunts South Africa is simple. How long can a nation survive divided by wealth, by race, by history? How long before the dream turns into a nightmare? The world may not be watching as closely anymore, but history is not done with South Africa. The generation that fought apartheid has grown old. The new generation faces its own battle, a war against inequality, corruption, and hopelessness. And like those before them, they must decide what kind of freedom they are willing to fight for.